The Legend of Zelda is a series about legacy. The legacy of the Triforce and the cycle of those three individuals destined to be reborn as manifestations of its symbols. The legacy of the hero, the princess, and the man with the evil eyes. The legacy of Hyrule's saviour, who brings all walks of life together to restore peace to the kingdom. It is all about legacy. This series-wide motif is a beautiful sentiment that really connects all of these games without needing a perfect chronology or timeline. In identifying with legacy, the Zelda series has established its own legacy, with massively recognizable and successful games making it one of Nintendo's best-selling franchises of all time. But, as is the case with almost any series, there exists a black sheep in the library of Zelda experiences, one whose identity seems so vastly estranged from the rest of the series. I'm of course talking about Majora's Mask. Now, I'm fully aware that more than 20 years since its release, it's not exactly controversial or particularly groundbreaking to say that Majora's Mask is a unique Zelda game. It takes place in the parallel and frankly disturbing world of Termina, injects elements of horror into the experience, and includes the titular character Zelda as nothing more than a memory, which, considering its position as a direct follow-up to Ocarina of Time, is a bold and definitively unique move. But as I said, this isn't news to anyone. It's well established that Majora's Mask is a brave departure from the standard narrative formula of the Zelda series at large. So what makes me so keen to discuss it so far from its release? Well, it is for that very reason that we are so far from the inception of this game that I want to talk about it. It has been more than 2 decades, and with the release of the second instance of a deliberate, direct sequel within the Zelda franchise, Tears of the Kingdom, there is still so much to this game that remains unique. In that large a gap of time, you might expect elements of Majora's Mask may be revisited or even outright repurposed, especially when it exists as the only other sequel experience in the series. Yet, looking across the franchise now, I can only say that it becomes ever more unique with every new Zelda release. In a series obsessed with the notion of legacy, Majora's Mask is the only game about casting that honour aside. It is the only game where time isn't constant, where your deeds are lost in the non-linear spiral of time, where you are driven not to have your name remembered, but instead to know the names of those around you. It's the only game where despite the memories you create, you are not ever known. And ultimately, it is the only game where you do nothing. Majora's Mask is special because it denies its own legacy. The recognition of one's legacy comes in the form of memory over time. Ultimately, a legacy is established because one's actions are perceived as influential and remembered for ages yet to come. Both memory and time are key facets in this notion. Likewise, these elements play a key role in the narrative of Majora's Mask, yet in counterintuitive ways. One of the most infamous design sentiments across the Zelda franchise, Majora's Mask prides itself on the strict 3-day in-game time limit it sets for players from the outset of their journey. You are given the freedom of doing what you want in those 3 days, before ultimately abusing your control over time to reset the world back to how it was at the beginning of those 3 days. This cycle repeats itself, however each time you get to keep the tangible fruits of your efforts from each previous cycle. This system is interesting for many reasons, both narrative and gameplay-wise, but to me the standout strength of it comes from how this non-linear control of time, where you are forced to turn back the clock, interacts with the recurring theme of memory that the game establishes. In fact, memory is embedded in the namesake tools that the hero Link gains and carries by his side throughout his journey in Termina, the masks. As a narrative that encourages getting to know the world and its inhabitants as a part of the story it wants to tell, Majora's Mask offers a plethora of quests to take on. In order to incentivize these quests, many of them offer masks as a reward for your time and dedication. All things considered, these side quests have a stronger impact on the player and the narrative being told than the main story beats do, and with good reason. They are experiences of tragedy or pleasure, gain or loss, that are eternalized as tangible memories that you carry and use as tools to assist you on your travels. They aren't one-time experiences because you always carry the memory of those adventures at your side. You manage to make a number of people happy, and the masks that you have are filled with that happiness. But then, what of those you helped and their memories? For instance, when you reaffirm the once hopeless Anju that her betrothed will return, when you help Kafei face his fears and, with his wedding mask in tow, finally confront his wife-to-be, and in a moment of tragic, beautiful reunion watch them share their vows thanks to the brave and unflinching dedication of the boy in green, how do they remember you? That's just it. They don't. When push comes to shove, the two are reunited for but a moment, and just as the magical memory of their matrimony is bestowed upon you as the couple's mask, you have no choice but to reverse all that you did to reunite the two, turning the clock back to the start again. Never can you save the people of Termina and have them hold on to that memory the way you do. Even if you tried your hardest to save everyone in a single cycle of 3 days, you will find it is impossible to do, as some memories are forged at the cost of others. You cannot help relinquish the mysterious toilet hand if you wish to share your land deeds with the business Dekus of Termina. You cannot both prove the success of your cafe hunt to Madame Aroma and give the Clocktown mailperson a new lease on life. If you want to help the defenseless woman who runs the bomb shop while she's being robbed from, then you deny the estranged lovers Kafei and Anju's final moments together. You cannot make your mark in everyone's life, no matter how hard you try. Time and memory in Majora's Mask are a huge part of its identity, much the same as time and memory are essential to the establishment of legacy, that overarching sentiment of the Zelda franchise. Yet, Majora's Mask subverts this theme by instead pitting time and memory against each other. In Majora's Mask, memory is a one-way street, one that never has the chance to accumulate into a legacy. While understanding masks as a tangible manifestation of memory is significant to a reading of this game, it is also important to remember that these tools can still serve the purpose that their base form implies. They are masks, tools to hide or otherwise obscure your identity. On its own, tools being used to conceal one's identity is not particularly stand out for a video game narrative and isn't something the Zelda franchise has shied away from. For example, Breath of the Wild has Link dress as a Gerudo Vi in order to gain admittance into the Gerudo town. Yet here, masks are not just a tool used to access part of the game, they are themselves the very building blocks of the game's narrative. As discussed before, masks are a relatively common reward for seeing through the struggles of many of Termina's inhabitants, acts of which are encouraged considering the lack of urgency brought on by the non-linear flow of time that you have direct control over. Yet, even if this lack of urgency inspired no desire to meet those not directly implicated in the main story, you are still required to collect at least 6 of the 24 total masks, and so to deny their place in the story at large is simply misguided. So, knowing that they are prevalent regardless of playstyle, it's important now to consider how they are used. The 3 most important masks are the transformation masks, the Deku, Goron, and Zora masks, forged by the lingering desires of people of those respective races whose lives were cut short. These masks completely change Link's form to fit the since past forms of those that the masks originated from. Using these forms is essential to saving the different corners of the world from their respective plights. The poisoned Deku swamps, the Goron's mountain blizzard, the overwhelming fog of the Zora's domain, and the curse that plagues the canyon. Of course, in each of these places, we know it is Link carrying out the last wishes of the recently departed, but to the world, that is not the case. The Deku people see not Link, but a young Deku scrub who braved the poison to save the Deku princess, her monkey friend, and the very waters that flow around them. The Goron people see not Link, but Romani, the Goron warrior who resisted the perils of the blistering winds to return warmth to the lives of the Goron and reunite the people with their chief. And the Zora see not Link, but rather the Indiegogo guitarist and father to the Zora sensation Lulu's children, Mikau, as he who ventured into the Dragon Cloud to clear the ocean, save the Zora children, and reunite the world's most respected band. That is all to say that never once does Link enter these equations. His deeds go unrecognized, and thus, his actions incur no legacy. Now, it's one thing to acknowledge that the changing of his very form incurs such a lack of fame, given that his very body is twisted to echo the form of someone who did exist. Of course, in that case, it only makes sense that our hero would not be known, because he in no way resembles himself. But this sentiment only begins with those forms. As you explore the realm further and further, you notice the ways in which Link is acknowledged. Almost all rely on reference to someone or something else. More often than not, Link is only acknowledged when he wears the appropriate mask. The mayor of Termina, for instance, only acknowledges Link's presence when he dons the couple's mask, as it soothes the tense arguments transpiring within his office. Granted, he doesn't acknowledge Link by name. Madame Aroma on the final night only acknowledges Link, again not by name, when he dons Kafei's mask as proof of his efforts in finding her son. Even without a mask, Kafei only knows Link by his clothing. In the whole game, there are 12 people who call Link by name. Of these people, Romani chooses not to acknowledge the name Link and instead calls him Grasshopper. The keepers of the Deku Playground only refer to you as young Link when assuming the form of a Deku scrub. Anju only knows him as Link because she mistakes him for the Goron patron of her inn. The Deku butler acknowledges his name as Link, yet looks at him as an echo of his own son instead of as a unique individual. Nowhere in this game is Link seen for being Link. The fact that he exists with so many faces, obscuring himself for the appropriate mask to satiate the needs around him, essentially muddies his entire identity, to the point where he as Link barely exists. And when no one knows the name Link, no one knows the man Link, the actions of Link, or the legacy of Link. With such a heavy emphasis on masks as tools to assume a new persona and obscure your former identity, Majora's Mask puts the character who is steeped in legacy in a world where no one does or ever will know his name. In a world where no one remembers what he did. In a world where no one knows his name. In a world so far removed from his own, despite its eerie reflection of Hyrule and its inhabitants, Link still brings peace to Termina and its people. You do eventually find yourself pitted against the very evil that brought this land to ruin, despite the land not knowing or caring who you are. Even in this final confrontation, your name or form are not known. In fact, when accumulated to its fullest potential, this battle isn't even between Link and Majora's Mask. Instead, it is a battle between two violent, malevolent deities, perhaps fulfilling their own legacy to clash. Yet, when the dust settles, the deity that is within Majora's Mask having been quelled, and the moon's descent into Termina finally being halted, Link emerges victorious. His efforts having borne fruit, he can look back on the world of Termina and the people within knowing that he saved them. They can live on, carry out the biggest carnival of time that Termina has ever known, bear witness to the matrimony of a beautiful, beloved young couple, and celebrate the beginning of a new Termina, one filled with joy. And yet, to who do they attribute this new world to? When the carnival starts, who do the people see playing alongside the Indiegogos? Who did the Deku family thank for the return of their princess and soothing of the king's anger? Who do they believe to have spread the new dance craze that the Rosa sisters are able to perform? Who helped ensure Romani and Cremia could continue their peaceful life on the ranch? To whose ears were the grievances of Guru Guru finally aired? Who was it who guaranteed that a young love, barely yet to begin blooming, would be saved, that their marriage could stand the test of the very time that was warped in the efforts to let that love endure? And does the world see that green-clothed, green-hat boy as he sneaks away from the very legacy of Termina that he was the sole benefactor of, despite never being known? That Link is not known by the people whose personal grievances he assisted in only to turn back the clock on is one thing. But what hits hard is knowing that when all is said and done, and the world is saved, and people are free to live out their lives to their fullest unimpeded joy and bliss, Link was and is and will never be known. The boy in green is a distant memory. Grasshopper was nothing more than a dream. The expert person finder has finished his job and gone off on his own way. The world is back to normal, and as far as that world of Termina is concerned, you did nothing. So, instead of being the hero of Hyrule and of Termina, Link does the one thing that the people know him for. That is to say, he refuses to exist in this legacy. His name will go unspoken, his efforts forgotten, and soon the people will weep the loss of the Deku child, the Goron warrior, and the Zora sensation that Link took the forms of. With his steed saved and still in search of his friend, Link turns from the world of Termina and chooses to deny a legacy. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is bar none my favourite Zelda experience. A lot of that is derived from the same uniqueness that has been attributed to this game since its release. It is scary and off-putting in its visual design, and has a flair for horror. The stories that run alongside the main narrative are tragic and beautiful and leave a lasting impact on you, especially when viewed within the ever-repeating and ultimately meaningless 3-day cycle such stories are condensed to. And the chaotic dystopia that is Clocktown a world of mixed acceptance, indecision, and ignorance to its own terminal fate come the Carnival of Time. These truly are a part of what makes this game unique to me and to many others. But what solidifies this game as special to me is that with every new game in the franchise, it becomes more and more unique for being the only one to do things the way it did. At the time of its release, it was still unique as it refused to apply the systems and structure that Ocarina of Time before it had ensured were successful and enjoyable, and in a way denied the legacy that game had set up for it to carry out. Yet today, we have all the games that follow from Majora's Mask to compare it to now. Games that did follow the structures and systems of Ocarina of Time, that did carry on that legacy. Inside and out, Majora's Mask is a testament to the denial of one's own legacy in creating something beautiful. That this game was able to take this dimension-crossing, time-traveling, regularly reincarnating manifestation of courage, whose name and likeness are known to every world he exists in, and strip him of that recognition. That we are able to see Link for the person he is in a world where no one knows his name or his legacy. That is what makes The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask a game with heart.